this is one of those Sundays where I have, and it's always a little bit of an awkward task of talking about private stuff in a really public setting. So I hope over the years I've done a reasonably good job of kind of saying, okay, this is important, this needs to come into the church, this doesn't. And we tried to steward that for, so many years with just the kids and what's going on there. Really with Susan's sickness and kind of navigating our way through that. What are the things that need to be said? And then silence is good too. Even when my heart condition, as many of you know, I stared down death earlier this year. And just faced it head on and didn't blink. Death blinked. But I shared that. This is one of those things that I know needs to come in, and we want to talk about it in here, but it's awkward. It's just awkward, and maybe that'll become clear to you. I had the chance to talk to the staff on Tuesday, and then Thursday night, I spoke with 250, 300 of the kind of volunteers that are part of Third Thursday, and then now to you today. So all 4 services today. So I bring you what is, for me, really good news, and I hope you see it that way as well, is this Friday, so the 25th, 5 days from today, I'm going to get married. And so, now, and so I also know coming in that some of you come in and you know about it. Some of you kind of have an inkling that maybe I've been hanging out with Sandy, and some of you are this is cold on you, and you're going, what's going on? Some of you are going, I don't care, get to the Bible lesson. But I know the ones that do care, and they need this moment, so we're going to make sure they get it. If I was you listening to that, I have a whole bunch of questions, but they're kind of 2 big buckets that I would get into. And one of them is, this seems kind of quick. This seems perhaps quick in 2 ways. Number 1, since Susan passed away. Number 2, how long have you known this lady? And so the answer is, I really haven't known her that long. And now that I say that out loud, I'm starting to doubt this whole thing. I thought about it to this point. But part of just the personal sojourn, and it's been fun. Susan Miller's been great, because in both instances, she had an opportunity to speak with, as kind of Susan's best friend and give an inside perspective. But there was really a time for me of 7 years, but the last 3 and the last 2 and the last 1 in particular, where lots of grieving and lots of hardship was done in that time. Those are painful, difficult times. So there's a sense even where emotionally, and discussions with Susan and lots of things, made it, okay, I'm kind of ready for life, though I honestly was not necessarily ready for this, and I would, like you, go, boy, this is faster than I would have expected. So I share that. The big question is, how are the girls with this? That's the big question, because you guys are all right, but you aren't the key deciders in this deal. How are the girls? So, and it's awkward is an operative word, because I started, Sandy and I were together like a couple times doing stuff, and then I thought, I don't even know where to bring this in, because I'm not sure where this is going. I don't know what it's going to do, but I'm fairly visible, and somebody's going to say, I saw you at Keegan's having dinner, and they're going to say to Sarah, what is that? Haley, what is that? And then they don't know, and then that's awkward. So I said to the girls, listen, I don't know, but I'm dating. And they said, who is it? And they didn't know Sandy. And I said, well, neither did I until, not too long ago. And I said, I think you guys should meet. So it's the reversal of when they would come and say, Dad, I got this guy. And I would say, well, tell me about this loser. And then they would unpack it. And so there was a meeting set up with Sarah and Haley and Sandy. And Sarah couldn't be there, just scheduling. But I said, I think you need to go ahead and meet anyway. So nervous. And then when the meeting was, I assumed over, my phone rang, it was Sandy. And then right on top of it was Haley. And so I said, Sandy, I'll call you back. I need to talk to Haley. So Haley just met her, and they just spent an hour and a half or whatever it was together. And this is exactly, these are the first words. Dad, she's perfect. She's just like Mom. She would be Mom's best friend. She's awesome. And she's amazing. Now, that's initial impression. Since then, the relationship has really deepened. So the girls are terrific. The guest book will be real simple. I can tell you who's in the guest book right now. Sarah, Tim, Haley, Tyler. So it'll be really easy. The girls will be there. Sarah was here first hour, so I had a chance to let her share a few things and pray for us. But I wasn't going to do this originally, but I saw how the week progressed, and what seemed to make everything a little bit, at least more kind of get your arms around it, was meeting Sandy. So I figured, though it's arduous to do 4 of these, On her anyway, I just thought it'd be good. So welcome Sandy as she comes, would you? She told Dave, we were talking to Dave Newquist before, and this was like the third time we've done it, so you would think it's rehearsed, but it's fairly spontaneous, and you don't know any of the questions. Full disclosure, you don't know any of the questions, do you? Well, some are predictable, like this one. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up, and your family, and all that stuff?
Yeah, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. Thank you.
I'm just helping.
I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and born and raised there. So I was there until about 5.5 years ago when I moved here. My family, not believers. I have 3 siblings, and for the most part, they're all in St. Louis.
And you came out here to work?
Yeah, I came out here for work. I received a phone call from ASU, a headhunter from that was hired by the university, and they said, "Have you ever been to Phoenix?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Do you know anything about ASU?" And I said, "Well, what is that?" And they said, "Arizona State University." I said, "Oh, okay."
And so you came out, and what were you hired to do?
Yeah, I was hired. I came out as a fundraiser for the School of Engineering, and I did that for about 3 years, and then I moved over into one of our research units, initially part of the School of Sustainability, and now part of the overall research wing at ASU, and we do some really cool stuff and sustainability planning for solar development, water issues, those sorts of things. Yeah, it is.
Where people are glazing
really
over.
Boring.
But it is, I will give you this, it's hard to explain, but it's great when you see it.
It is. It's a really cool place. We create these really cool visualizations and environments so that decision makers can make better decisions.
Talk about maybe just us getting to, how old are you? Because people are asking me that, because they want to know.
29.
They all look at you. What is it?
29.
Oh,
no,
wow.
I'm
This isn't
47. 47.
Okay, because I've had several people say, "Gee, she looks young." And I said, "But that's because she's standing next to me. So I look old. That's why she looks young." So talk a little bit about maybe kind of how we kind of met and just that. I don't even know what that question means. Good luck.
Yeah, thanks. So we met. Actually, I served here and attended here until about last May. And then May, June of last year, I moved over to the Tempe campus and started working and serving with Ricardo Stewart and others over there. And Tom was in conversation with them and asked who was in key or doing things over there.
Who they saw as key leaders.
Yeah, and my name came up, and out of just an encouragement, and at the same time last year, I had a few different job offers to move out of the Phoenix area. So Tom asked if maybe it would help if we got together, help Tempe if we got together, and he just primarily, I guess, wanted to let me know that I was important or something. Maybe?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think that's what it was.
Okay,
yeah, that was the whole intent.
Yeah. So we got together for coffee, and it was just a very, or seemed to be a very normal conversation. And what we found in that conversation was that we talked, and then we talked, and then we talked, and then we kept talking, and
We actually
here we are.
had a date.
We did?
Well, that kind of that first one.
Oh yeah, he did. He called me up and he said, and this was early on, he called up and he said, hey, I'm thinking maybe we could go grab a bite to eat or something. And I said, okay. And when I got off the phone, I realized that he had asked me out on a date.
I know.
It was cool.
That's when I realized it was after we got off the phone that I'd asked her out on a date. So we just started hanging out, and probably there's some key moments along the way. One of them was several weeks into it when you revealed, or really confronted me on something.
Oh, yeah. When I came out here, I didn't know anyone. As I said before, I had never really been to Phoenix before. And so when I moved, I came out by myself with my dog, and I knew no one for 1,500 miles, so it was just me and my dog. My dog's name is Humphrey, by the way. And by this time, 4 weeks or something into this, Tom had asked me many questions. I mean, absolutely everything, blood type and, whatever. I mean, this is Tom we're talking about. But he had never once said a word about my dog. Now, and I've heard the guy talk, heard Tom talk for quite a few years, so I kind of thought maybe this was an issue for him. So we're on the phone, and I said, Tom, I noticed that you've never said anything about my dog. And he does yeah, that's a problem. It's a deal breaker, in fact. And so, so we had to kind of talk through that. And the dog is no longer living here.
Yeah.
We
put him down. No, we didn't put the dog down.
He is safely in St. Louis with my father.
So let's tell that story. Because this will give us a glimpse into your family.
Yeah.
So how you kind of not, before you told them about Humphrey, you went home to tell your folks that we were getting married. My mother doesn't know, by the way, yet. We're going to tell my mother, we're taping this. I'm going to tell my mother a little bit. We're going to save it as a surprise for my mom.
Yeah.
We wanted to tell your folks.
Yeah. So the week after Easter, I flew home to St. Louis to give them the news. And as Tom said, this is it's kind of awkward at our ages and everything. How do you say, wow, I'm getting married, and I really hadn't dated for really since I was saved. So for about 8 years. So people no longer, especially my family, no longer really asked about dating or anything like that. So I needed not only to tell them that I was dating, but also to tell them that I was getting married. So I'm at my dad's house. We're hanging out, piddling around the house and stuff. And so I said, Dad, I have some news to share with you. And he said, oh, really? And I said, yeah. I said, well, I met this guy, and we started talking, and then we kept talking, and now we're going to get married. And he said, oh. And he said, but what about Humphrey? And I said, well, yeah, that's part of it. Humphrey, we're going to have to find another home for Humphrey, and I don't know what I'm going to do with them. And so he thought for about a half a second, and he said, well, if nobody else will take Humphrey, I'll take Humphrey. And I said, oh, that's great to know. And he starts, looking around the house, and he gets his sketch pad out to work on the electric fence. And now, by the way, he has not asked anything about who this guy is or nothing.
Didn't even ask my name.
Nothing, not even his name. So this goes on, and he's consumed with the thought of the dog coming. So the next morning, and still he hasn't asked any other questions. The next morning, he wakes up, and I'm heading over to see other family members. So traditionally we always go and get Chinese food. So we're at the Chinese restaurant. We have our food in front of us, and he says, well, let's get back to the big news. And I said, yeah, I'm getting married. And he said, no, Humphrey. Let's talk about Humphrey. Yeah, that was it. He never did ask.
No, he never did ask. It's awesome.
He does now know
we're
that
so
his
close.
name is Tom Shrader. And yeah. He knows a little bit more now. But
So the dog's there, the dog's safe, and we're happy about that. So you came from an unbelieving home. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about coming to know Christ.
Yeah, well, as I said, I was saved 8 years ago, and I had no friends that were believers, never had a Bible, knew nothing about all of that. And so life came crashing down on me. I felt empty and hollow, and although it seemed on the outside that I was successful in my career, and I have a beautiful daughter who's 27 now. She was in her teen years, and that was traumatic. And so it was just bad. I was just broken and a mess, and didn't know anything. Didn't know what to do next. So middle of the afternoon in April in St. Louis, the sun is shining. I'm driving down the highway, and just crying and upset and messed up and broken. And there's a terrible hailstorm, and the hail is pounding down on my car. All the cars are stopped, and between that and just life, I just said, if there's a God, I need you here. I don't know how to go on. And so at that moment, I just felt his presence, and I was like, okay, so there is a God. And as the hailstorm stopped, I started my car up and went home and prayed and said, I really don't know what this means or what do I do next. So I said, God, I know that you're here, but you'll have to show me with baby steps what comes next. And so 2 days later, I was meeting my girlfriend at a park to run, and she called, and we would get together at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and she called and said, my kids are sick, I can't meet you at the park. I said, okay. So I went to the park, and as I'm pulling in, there's a sweet old man at the entrance to the park, and he tries to stop my car, and I'm crying and still, just really upset. And so I just kept on going. And I parked my car, tied my shoes, got out to run, stopped in at the restroom, came out of the building where the restroom was, and the man is now at the door waiting for me. And he hands me a Bible and tells me that Jesus loves me. So I take the Bible, and I'm too stunned to really say anything. So I go back to my car, and I said, wow, okay, I know that there's a God. I know that you're here with me. I know that it has something to do with the Bible. But I don't know what next, so I'm going to trust you to show me. And he led me to an Acts 29 church in St. Louis, and here I am today.
And then when you came out here, Acts 29, you looked us up and landed, I guess, saw a variety of Acts 29 churches, really.
Yeah.
This was one of them.
Yeah. So I had contacted the pastors and the elders in St. Louis to say, I'm moving out to Phoenix, and can you point me in the right direction? So we went on the network website, and I did. I found quite a few different churches, but because I was working at a university and spending all day kind of in the university setting, I wanted to be sure that I attended a church that had a little bit more age diversity than that. And so I found East Valley Bible Church, and the first Sunday I went, there was this crazy guy with long hair, and I just knew I was in the right spot.
Those were the good old days.
Yeah.
Those were the good old days. Then when you got here, you started serving. That's a key part of the story. Before, when I first, kind of had that coffee with Sandy and then came back and said, wow, she's pretty awesome, which was everything I'd heard. I was able to vet her pretty closely because a lot of staff people had worked with her. So I did all of that before they knew that there may be some interest there, because I didn't want them to give me a distorted version of who she was. But you had served in
children's ministry, student ministries. I had done quite a bit with our community and global engagement groups.
You went to Morocco, I think.
Yeah, I went to Morocco.
Okay, let me ask you a couple more, because these are the questions that I get that kind of, what is it like to date an icon?
Wow.
I mean, that's probably one of those things that they just keep, I hear that all the time.
Wow.
Well, I know. And I say, I'll ask her, I don't know. I don't know what it's like.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to,
Wait, you shouldn't have an answer to this. I'm worried now.
Really?
Yeah.
It has been interesting. We had to sort through the 65 cases of water bottles in his garage.
I have a lot of water in my garage.
Yeah, those sorts of things, very interesting. But it also has been really kind of fun as we've slowly told people that we're dating and all of that, and as I tell people here in Phoenix that I'm dating, and I go on to say, and I'm dating Tom Shrader. Wow.
Ooh.
Yeah. But no, seriously, that's been. It's more visible in that sense, but the girls have been absolutely fabulous in helping with that, as well as just all of you here at church, and for the awkwardness of it, and at the same time the visibility and all of that. It's just been great.
Does it seem like we didn't date very long? Was it just, what was the compelling? characteristic, isn't it?
Well, it's your charm.
Oh, I would have said that.
You're
That's
just
enough. Okay, I'm done.
amazing.
No, I'm done. That's enough. I don't know how much to just talk about, but enough to let you see, hopefully, that things are really good. I get just a glimpse of Sandy and a glimpse of what's been going on. So we are happy. We're thrilled. Like I said, it's 5 days from now. So next Friday, I'll be here and teaching next Sunday. I'll give you a report on how it was. It'll be awesome. And we just hope that you're as happy for us as we are really to be together. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you. By the way, too, in the service time, that fits better at the end, except at the end is communion. So the transition here is not smooth because we're going to Joseph. So let's just go there and do that, all right? Open your Bibles to Genesis 37. If you need a Bible, raise your hand. If you get a Bible from us, it's page 20. So I said we're going to look at the Genesis 37 to 50 and Daniel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And as always, though, we'll be looking at character studies, Joseph, Daniel, and the boys. God is the one who is our focus here. We kind of drop in a sense, again, though Daniel is the key figure, Genesis 37:2, these are the records of the generation of Jacob. Now, I'll tell you what we're going to do today. We're looking at chapter 37, 38, 39. Chapter 37, and I'll make some comments on it briefly, is if you're reading through, it's almost like a parenthetical insert because it's like Joseph, Judah, and then like all Joseph played out. Chapter 38 is that study. It's a 20-year kind of overview of the life of Judah. It's really important in the overall story, not just of Joseph or Jacob or the boys, but of redemption. Through Judah comes the line that leads us to Jesus. It's a great story. If you read through there, man, it is X-rated. If we were to make a movie out of chapter 38, it's got some sick, dark stuff in it. And Judah's in the middle of it. But the rest of the story, as we get to the end of the book of Genesis about Judah, is a story of redemption and forgiveness. So the majority of Judah, we're going to look at the last week of the study. I've made about as much reference to it, maybe one more, as I will. So I'm going to really focus, though there's this bigger story, this focus on Joseph. Let me just read you a quote from the introduction of the commentary that James Boyce writes. He said, "If ever there was a man for all seasons, it's Joseph. Joseph's life spanned the social spectrum of the ancient world. Raised as a future heir of the wealthy Jewish patriarch, he fell into slavery in the far-off Gentile land, but later rose to a position of prominence as a second in command only to Pharaoh. He was loved and hated, favored and abused, tempted and trusted, exalted and abased. Yet at no point, and this becomes really important in here, at no point in the 110-year life of Joseph did he ever seem to get his eyes off God or cease to trust him. Adversity did not harden his character. Prosperity didn't ruin him. He was the same in private as in public. He was truly a great man. The single greatest characteristic of Joseph was his absolute faithfulness to God under all circumstances. So that's what we're going to look at. As I said, the challenge is, I was talking to Neil. When Neil taught Genesis chapter 37, I think in that chapter he spent 4 weeks. Is that right? So he spent 4 weeks in that chapter. I have no idea how long in 39. Maybe another 3, 4. So he spent 7 weeks in this section we're going to spend a week on. When I taught it, as kind of an overview, I spent a week in chapter 37, a week in chapter 39. So when you take that, plus the time we just carved out, we got to get a lot crammed in, done here in 38 minutes. Each of these lessons of these 4 are designed to be a standalone. So if you just came here today and you're going back to Duluth tomorrow, and you go, I'm not going to be here for the rest of the series, you can get a lot out of this. But I think as much as any series we've ever done, this really will build each week. We literally, on the video, at the end of week 1, 2, and 3, could put to be continued. So what I want to do is give you an overview of chapter 37 and 39, and then pull some practical points out. I'll do some as we go, and then kind of 5 summary points. What makes this even more complicated is your familiarity with these chapters. Like some of you have read this in the Hebrew, some of you have memorized it, some of you are fluent in it, some of you have read it, some of you couldn't find it. And so I'm trying to figure out how much we can kind of assume and how much needs to be detailed. So this is really difficult. You should walk out and kind of go, boy, there's a lot there that we didn't get to. And if that's your assessment, the answer is yes. There's a lot we didn't get to. But I think at 8:30, I did a pretty good hour of hitting the high points and just kind of applying it as we go. I don't want to make it a study of just Joseph and not apply it to us. It's an amazing story. I just made this list of wealth, betrayal, survival, success, seduction, perseverance, triumph, reconciliation, restoration. So you're going to learn a lot, as I said, about Joseph, but you're going to learn a lot about yourself, and you're going to learn a lot about God. And in Joseph's life, there is kind of that penthouse, outhouse, penthouse, outhouse, penthouse moment. And what you see is that in those inevitable tough times in life, important now, as well as the successful times in life, you see the faithfulness of this man, but you see the faithfulness of God. So often when we teach through the New Testament and we come to certain truths, we'll illustrate them through the Old Testament. Nowhere would this be more this is the kind of link we would have. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And we know God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Nowhere could we illustrate that any better than in the life of Joseph or Daniel, for that matter. So that's the whole thing. There's the story. Verse 3. Here's Joseph, and it tells us that Israel, that's Jacob, loved Joseph more than his sons because he was the son of his old age, and he made a varied colored tunic for him. Joseph had a favorite wife, Rachel, Jacob had a favorite wife, Rachel, and Joseph was his firstborn son of that relationship. And he was a favorite for him. And it wasn't just that he had that internally. My mom, here you go, we'll use my mom. There's 4 boys. My mom's favorite is my brother John. Now, for years she would never admit it until one night, put a little booze in her and got her to admit it, but no, I'm teasing. But one night, just in a state of confusion, she kind of acknowledged it. And that's not hurtful to me because I knew that anyway. If I were my own parent, I wouldn't like me. So it wouldn't even be a hard thing. John was easiest, John was the smartest, John was but it's one thing if your kid, kind of is your favorite and you know it. It's another thing if you kind of give him a little pendant that says I'm Dad's favorite. Well, that's what this coat was. It's a long sleeve garment, probably all the way down to his ankles, and it's very ornamental, and just showed for the boy. And I think this is right. I think the only passing of personal property of land that we see in Jacob's life is to Joseph. So we go, this is the favorite. And the other boys knew it. Now, they weren't as sophisticated as I am that somebody go, yeah, I get it. I understand why. They hated him. Verse 4, his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of them. Well, they saw it probably in the way he talked about him and treated him, but every day they saw that coat, it was a reminder, he's Dad's favorite. And they hated him. In fact, they couldn't speak to him on friendly terms. Now, several of the commentators point out that it might have been, in a sense, for good reason that Joseph was Dad's favorite, and that their hatred might have been deeper than the favoritism. It might have been that Joseph's existence and in a sense his goodness, his godliness, his faithfulness was an offense to them personally because it exposed their sin. They looked at him and said, in their own mind, we know what we are. He's not that. This is awful. It's the same thing that we saw when we looked at John chapter 3, verse 19. We said the light of the world came into the world, and that's Jesus, and he exposes the darkness. He exposes the sin. He exposes the challenges and the difficulties and the evilness that's in their life. And that could be, again, the extent that Joseph has in their life. Joseph has two dreams, and they're very similar. And he has these dreams, but doesn't keep them to himself. He shares them. So we see the one that's in verse 7, and they're binding sheaves in the field, and one rose up, and the other stood erect, and the others look around, and they bow down before it. And his brothers say, wait a minute, are you going to reign over us? Is this what's going to happen? Then he has another one, and it's a verse 9, lo, I still have another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars are bowing down to me. And he's related to his father and his brothers. His father rebuked him and said, what is this dream that you've had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come and bow down around you? Now, again, on the surface, you'd be very critical of Joseph. Be pragmatic and say, listen, little man, if you're going to have these dreams, keep them to yourself. Use your head. Tell dad, don't tell anybody else. There's another way to look at that. And it's to say, Joseph knew this was from God and is in a sense doing a favor by communicating to mom and dad and brothers that this is what God's going to do. This is what's going to play itself out in the future. I've got a message from God. I'm convinced it's from him, and because of that, I really feel compelled to share this with you. And it doesn't matter. The practical ramification of it, Father stopped and contemplated it. That's what we learn in verse whatever it is, verse 10. Father thought this through, like verse 11, but the brothers weren't. Now look at the progression. There's a term that we find in the New Testament, and the idea of the root of bitterness. So look at verse 4. The brothers hated him. Verse 5, they hated him even more. Verse 8, they hated him even more. Verse 11, they're jealous of him. When we looked at the book of Galatians, we talked about the fruit of the Spirit. We talked about the fruit of the flesh. The deeds of the flesh are evident. They're immorality and sorcery, but also strife, jealousy, disputes, anger. When Paul is writing to the church at Ephesus in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31, he talks about us getting rid of things. And he said, let all bitter, and there's a sense here where it accelerates. It's internal and then it explodes externally. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away along with all malice. It's something that gets into you and it takes root and then it begins to boil and it becomes outward, it becomes verbal, and ultimately it becomes violent. Well, there's a sense of that's what's going on in this experience right here. The boys are mad, they hate him, they get more mad, and now they're jealous. But there's kind of a restraining factor in this, and that's the presence of Jacob. The boys really have no way, understanding that he's dad's favorite, they have no way of really manifesting this anger until verse 12. The brothers are in the pasture of their father's flock at Shechem. And then Jacob decides unwisely that he's going to send Joseph on a reconnaissance trip and say, go gather information, if you would, about the boys, about their efforts, how that's going. And so he goes on this mission, and he's in the valley of Hebron, and he comes to Shechem, and he found a man, and he said, here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the boys. I got a bunch of sheep. You should know them. Easy to recognize them. He said, no. They went on to Dothan. So what he's done is he's traveled 20 miles and 30 miles away from me. He's like 50 miles away from home now. So he's in a land minus the protection of his father, and where the boys are free to respond without, at least in their mind, the restraint of what dad might do. Verse 18. When they, that's the boys, saw him, Joseph, at a distance, and before he came close to them, they plotted against him and says, let's put him to death. And then they said to one another, verse 19, here comes the dreamer. Let me hit the pause button. Let's do a little application. Because here's what they did. They just saw Joseph. That's the first thing that came to their mind. When you're walking down the hallway at work and there's people coming the other way, what do they say to one another when you come walking at them? Here comes the... What is it you want them to say? And to the extent that you have these things you want them to say, what are you doing to ensure that they would be able to say it? When we get in here one day and we're doing your memorial service and we pass around the microphone and people have the opportunity to share, what do you want them to say about you, here you go, without having to lie? Because it's like you never, and everybody says good things at a memorial service, got it. You never go, you know what, I'm kind of glad he's gone. We had a guy that we used to know and work with, and he had a habit of correcting you. You would use a word, and he would point out how you've used it incorrectly. And I don't do that so much. I do it with certain phrases, like with Sandy. Early on, Sandy said to me, I love you 110%. And I said, that means nothing to me now because 110% is impossible. She said, well, that's all right. I meant 10%. I mean, it was like, it degenerated. But she'll use that phrase 100. I hate that. He gave 110% of effort. Well, I doubt they gave 100%, but they certainly couldn't give 110% by definition. So why are you cluttering, losing credibility with me as you insert that into a conversation? So periodically, I'll do things like that. But this guy would distinguish between words and verbs and tenses. And here's what I discovered. Is that apparently was a far more endearing quality after he was gone than when he was alive, because we heard about this quirkiness at the funeral, and I was sitting next to a friend and said, it wasn't all that charming. At the funeral, what do you want him to say positively, without lying? And then what are you doing to make that happen? What do they say? What's that first reaction when they see you? In the course of a conversation, they have, well, here you go, now with caller ID. Phone rings, your name pops up, bam, what do they think? Hey, how often does it ring once and then that's it, which means that decline? Oh, Tom Shrader, decline. I mean, how often does that happen? Back to the story, here comes the dreamer. And when he comes, they said, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And we'll say that there had been no temple prostitute. Where am I going? Temple prostitute. How to get him there? And they'll say, here he comes with the dreams, blah, 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 blah. Wild animal devoured him. Verse 21. Reuben heard this and rescued him out of their hands and said, let's not take his life. And his plan is to put him in this pit and then return and get him out, take him back to Dad. And it looks noble. If it's truly noble, he'd take a stand and say, he's the oldest, he'd take a stand and go, here's what this is. He could take the stand and he could literally come and he could say, no, let's stop, let's not do it. But he's going to come back and retrieve him and probably gain favor with Dad. But by the time he's done that, the story has taken a different twist. So he comes and they lay hands on him, verse 23, and they strip Joseph of his tunic, the multicolored tunic that was on him. I'll bet they loved that moment, to be able to tear that away, to be able to take that away. I imagine there wasn't much left of the tunic as they started ripping at that. Here's what's semi-pathological. Then they sat down and ate. Apparently, whatever they were doing, and it was disaster. It was really a dastardly deed. Even in the midst of it, apparently they had no problem eating. They had taken and they'd thrown him into a pit. The pit was empty. There wasn't any water, and they sat down and ate. Now, it's somewhat sketchy there, but the blanks get filled in Genesis 42:21. The boys are confronted now. They've come back to Egypt. There's Joseph. The boys now are being thrown into prison, and their mind flies back over these decades. And here's what they said to one another. Truly, we are guilty concerning our brother, because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us. Yet we didn't listen to him. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. So now here's what we're learning. As they're taking Joseph, it's not that he just went away. All of a sudden he said, don't do this. This isn't right. He's pleading for his life. He's begging for mercy. But there is none. Very American, entrepreneurial Judah in verse 26 says, hey, what profit is it if we kill our brother and cover him up? Why don't we sell him and make a little dough on this deal? This is Judah, by the way, same main character now that we're going to see in chapter 38. So they devise a plan. They sell him to the Midianites as the traders are passing by. They pull him out and they lift him up and they sell him to the Ishmaelites. And what they do then is to take this tunic and they soak it in a male goat's blood. And they bring it to their dad and he examines it, and his conclusion is verse 33, a wild beast has devoured him. Joseph's surely torn to pieces, and they don't bother in any way, shape, or form to correct him. Brothers and sisters come in to console him, but there is no consolation in this. Verse 36, meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, and Potiphar's officer, the captain of the bodyguard. So to this chief, if you will, of the secret service, Potiphar, now Joseph is transferred in terms of possession. So he goes from slavery here, he goes from the pot here into slavery in a foreign land, Egypt. Egypt was a wealthy land. It was a land that was known for mathematics and construction. Religiously, one commentator gives us this insight. So far as its religion was concerned, it was most ignorant and polytheistic of all the nations of the ancient world. Joseph's dropped into that. He'd stop. It'd be kind of interesting to go, wow, I wonder what Joseph did in this. And I kind of wonder, where's God in all of this? Clearly, there must have been something that Joseph did. And yet, by the way, we're never given any indication of that at all. In fact, all we see really Joseph, other than you could maybe argue some strategic thing about sharing dreams, and all you could do is see good things in Joseph's life. And he's certainly faithful at every twist and turn that we're going to look at when we get to chapter 39. Joseph's taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him for the Ishmaelites. So we resume the story. The parenthetical insert in chapter 38, we're going to try to tie that together that last week that we're studying this. So 3 weeks from now. But here's where we find out where God is. Look at verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph. Look at verse 3. The Lord was with Joseph. Then there's an event, we'll come back and examine it, where Joseph is seduced, or at least Potiphar's wife attempts to seduce him, and he resists. He does everything right, and then ends up not just in jail, but in the dungeon, in the inner bowels of the prison. Verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph. Verse 23, the Lord is with Joseph. And he's not just with Joseph, I want you to see this, in some sort of an abstract way. Verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph, so he became successful. Verse 3, the master saw the Lord was with Joseph, and how God caused all things he did to prosper at his hand. Verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. Verse 23, the Lord was with Joseph, and whatever he did, the Lord made prosper. It is a giant mistake if you try to interpret your physical circumstances as being an accurate barometer of your spiritual condition. I mean, if you stood back, you'd look at this and you go, Joseph, there must be something that you've done wrong. And we see that human tendency manifest itself often in biblical character. So we see it in Job. Job, you must have done something. And the reality is, God's with him. God is there in the midst of what we might perceive to be very difficult circumstances. Why? Well, because God works in those circumstances. They not only do they see that God is with Joseph in terms of just understanding it in some religious way, it's a very practical way, because there's a transition and a correlation between the fact that God is with Joseph and he prospers. Let me stop and hit the pause button and try to do application again. In your life, your greatest asset in the marketplace is your faith. An active faith, a real faith, a faith that's life transforming. I've taught this before, but I've never made this final connection. I've thought about it, never did it till today. Because I've contended for a long time, your faith, Christian faith lived out, your faith lived out, is a great asset in the marketplace. And it's visible. That's verse 3. The master saw this. I went online today, and all I did was type in what employers want in employees. And so I'm sure there's all sorts of lists. But I got a list, so this is totally secular. This is not some Christian thing. Totally secular. 11 characteristics. 6 of them are kind of skills in terms of ability to speak and spell and technology. 5 of them, though, I would say are highly relational, that are manifestations of a love that you would have for Christ. Here are the 5. Interpersonal skills. The ability to relate well to people from diverse backgrounds. So there's not a prejudice in there, because God loves people and I love people, and the idea is to relate to them. Ethical application. How about this? The ability to apply moral standards and appreciate values in the work setting. So I just go to work and I do what's right because it's right. I can't worry about that. Not going to cheat. I know everybody else cheats, but I'm not going to. Career planning, the cultivation of a personal sense of direction and desire for improvement, including a willingness to learn. Who's more coachable than somebody that loves Christ? Because there's humility that's all through this person. Diversity awareness, demonstration and respect and empathy for diverse community. Think of Jesus and the woman on the well. Think of all of a sudden the barriers that break down. Jesus, the great women's liber. We should come along, as we love Christ, we go, it really doesn't matter to us what color you are, or what your background might be, or what your financial standing is. We love you because you're a person. Teamwork, the ability to encourage cooperation and collaboration and partnership. This has Christianity written all over it. So when you talk to somebody, and I always love this, always distinguish in the service industry. Let me help you out in business. It's all service. I spent, you all know this, I spent 7 years, I was in the hospital a ton. And we were talking about it the other day. I've never been in a place where the employees are more here's the corridor. This happened to me every time I went to the hospital. I hated this. The corridor is 6 feet wide. It's 1,000 feet long. I'm walking down it. There's one person coming the other way, somebody on staff, and they won't say hello to me. I don't understand how that can happen. I don't understand it. But that's just there. But let me tell you what. Let me tell you something. If you're in the hospital, that's pretty service-oriented. You know what? Everything's service-oriented. Sandy and I were at Oregano's the other night, and the place was just really busy. So we got over in the corner, because it was a 45-minute wait. God does not want me waiting 45 minutes to eat an overpriced salad, okay? So at the corner of the bar, you can sit at the bar, and then you get served right away if you want a salad. So we're sitting there, and there's a chick working. Her name's Erin. I said with an E, and she goes, and an R, and an I, and an N. I said, really? So we started back and forth. She was awesome. Because she said, you guys just going to sit, or do you want something to eat, or are you just waiting for a table, or you're just going to what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. And ultimately the menus went away, and I said, I'd like to order. What's your employee number? Where's the card? How do I offer critique on you? And she fired back and said, it's oregano's online. Just go to service. I'm number 22. She was great. We talk a while, and I said something, and she said something, and she said, young life. I said, young life? Yeah. She goes, I'm involved in young life. Oh, you're a believer? Yeah. And we just started talking. I'm saying, now it's her personality, but she manifested. If I'm Bob Oregano, this is who I want working for me right here. This is what I'm looking for in a person. And the same thing is true of your office, I think. Here's the story. We got about 12 minutes. Here's the story. Out comes Potiphar, and Potiphar finds Joseph to be an amazing man, so he puts everything, verse 6, everything is in Joseph's charge. Joseph becomes the CEO, if you will, of Potiphar Enterprises, and you know the story. Potiphar's wife then comes. She's a shy, subtle girl, so she sees Joseph and says, lay with me in verse 7. Now, I don't want to... Here's my problem with this story is so often we look at it and we think of Joseph as this little wimpy guy and who knows Potiphar's wife. Well, let me bring it to life. Verse 6, last sentence. Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Okay? So here's this virile, he hasn't been around any women here in this whole prison thing. This virile, handsome, obviously appealing, attractive, charming. I mean, he's very winsome, fit. Who would he remind us of? Oh, yeah. Now, Mrs. Potiphar doesn't say this. It does say that about Joseph. But here's how I go with Mrs. Potiphar. Okay, so Potiphar's a big guy. He's going to have a trophy wife. He's not going to have some dog that he's married to. She may not be able to spell Potiphar, but he's going to have this beautiful... I'm reading that into the story. Okay, and the minute she starts to sag and bag and drag, boom, she's gone because he can trade them through real fast. Okay, see that? That changes the story, doesn't it? So here's Joseph minding his own business, and along comes Ms. Potiphar and says, lay with me, and he says no. But it's not a one-time deal. Verse 10, day after day after day after day after day. Till finally one day, verse 12, she grabs him by the garment, says, lay with me, and he left. He runs out, and she's there holding his tunic. Potiphar comes home, and she says, listen, here's what happens. Here's the charge. And verse 17, a little naggy here. The Hebrew slave who you brought to us. You can hear her go, it's you, it's your fault. Now, Potiphar, and I got that I'm outside the text a little bit. But I think I'm right. Verse 19, she's rambling and rambling and rambling. It came up on the master, heard these words of his wife, when she spoke to him, saying, this is what your slave did to me, that he burned with anger. Now, here's my contention. Is the source of his anger isn't Joseph, it's Ms. Potiphar. I think he knows he's married to a hoe. I think he knows it. And here's how I know that he knows it. If he believed her, what would he have done? He'd have killed Joseph. He doesn't kill Joseph. In fact, a little bit later in the story, he's going to kind of get all back hooked up in everything. I think he knows, you know what? In fact, I could even say, Joseph, I'm really sorry here. Well, there's really nothing I can do here. I got to do something. No, I can't. I'm not going to kill you because you don't deserve that. But I'm going to take you. This isn't good. But I'm going to take you and put you into the jail, verse 20, into the place where the king's prisoners are confined. And that's where he was jailed. I'm going to put you in the bowels of the jail. Worst part. But it's better than killing you. That's all I can do. Now, there's about 88 ways to go here. But I skipped a big verse, verse 9. I skipped this big verse because he's refusing the master and he's pointing out, listen, he hasn't withheld anything from me. Nobody's greater in this whole house than me. He's talking to Ms. Potiphar. I couldn't do this. The only thing he's kept from me is you. You're his wife. But here's the overriding factor. How could I do this great evil and sin against God? See, he's not motivated just by his circumstances, but he understands it's this relationship with God that's going to drive this thing. I can't do this. Not for Potiphar. I couldn't do it to him. But ultimately, I couldn't sin against God. See, it's that honest, fair, in our case, biblical theology that sustains him and perseveres, allows him to persevere in the midst of really difficult circumstances. Let me tell you what, I could see myself going two ways on this thing. One, I'd be going, wow, look at her. There's not a guy around that's not going to understand this. There's not a guy around. If I get caught at all, there's nobody here. It's possible that nobody will ever tell. And certainly after once or twice or three, but a day after day, come on. And then there's nobody here. And you can hear her say, listen, Joseph, nobody's ever going to know. I'm not going to tell you. You're going to tell nobody. So I could see him cave at that point, or I see myself cave at that point. But he doesn't. Here's the next thing. If I got to that moment, I'm not sure I could handle what comes next. Now I'm in prison. So as they're dragging me to prison, I can hear the discussion in my mind going, this is interesting, God. So let's review. I'm my dad's favorite because I'm the one faithful one out of all these boys. So all I did was communicate in a dream what you communicated to me. All I did was communicate that to them. And they put me in slavery. Then I get to Egypt. Didn't do anything there. I'm in Potiphar. I'm in slavery. I work hard. He can see the manifestation of that. This comes about. Now God apparently following you isn't very beneficial. Certainly not good for a career move. And not very satisfying. But I'm pretty sure that Joseph didn't respond that way. Let me give you 5 points. I'll expand that one as kind of the close. Number one, that I learned from this, theology affects behavior. Because look what happens next. He's in jail, verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. And the chief jailer committed to Joseph's charge all the prisoners who were in the jail, so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. And the chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. Joseph understood God. He didn't necessarily understand exactly what God was doing at this moment. But here's what I know. There's no record of him complaining. Here's what I know. There wasn't any complaining. There wasn't any pouting. There wasn't any self-pity. How do I know? Because that's not very winsome. And whatever it was about Joseph, Potiphar saw it, the chief jailer saw it. If he was down there pouting and accusations and all this, he's not going to put him in charge of everything. Here's the second thing. His suffering has purpose. I started writing a bunch of stuff about suffering, but suffering and hardship doesn't mean that God's somehow abandoned you. But he's allowing you to see him in the midst of it. Suffering allows us to see God work. And we know God causes all things to work together for good. The whole perseverance part. Count it all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing the testing of your faith produces endurance. So how do I grow? How do I get strong? Well, I get to see God work. Work through suffering and pain and hardship, and the end result is perseverance. Stick-to-itiveness. It's the suffering that builds character. There's the third point. Faith is obviously visible and it's attractive. By the way, we see that really throughout Scripture often, but I thought of, as I kind of think, okay, there must be another illustration I can go to pretty quickly of that. I thought of the book of Philippians where Paul's in jail and he's chained to jailers all day, and he writes this, Philippians 1:12. Now I want you to know, brethren, that my circumstances have turned out for the greater progress of the gospel, so my imprisonment in the cause of Christ has become well known throughout the whole Praetorian Guard and everyone else. So now God's using this whole thing to expand the gospel. He says, way more than that. And that most of the brethren, trusting in the Lord because of my imprisonment, have far more courage to speak the word of God without fear. He said, and my imprisonment has encouraged the brothers. This faith, Potiphar sees it, the chief jailer sees it, and they're not repelled by it. Here's what they say. I don't want your God, but I want the benefits of your God. I'm not interested in worshiping your God, but I'll let you do that for me. You come and you work for me. Here's the fourth thing, that time is your ally. There's a period of time that's covered here of decades that we see in Joseph's life. We tend to think of time as our enemy. Sandy and I were talking about the difference between getting married at 22 and 62. And we were just talking about it. It's just very different. You're 22, you're planning your life, you're planning your future, you're thinking about, I didn't mention, but Sandy and I are going to try to have a family. No, are you kidding? You think I'm nuts? I'd have kept the dog if I wanted that. Out of your mind? So we're talking about it. Like all those things that you talk about that take like a long time. All we got to do is make sure when we go into a town we know where the hospital is. I mean, that's all I got to do. I don't really know anything else. And so we had some very serious, because I'm really serious about it, very serious conversations. Because she's 15 years younger than I am, and I told her actuarially, and I'm not a healthy, did I mention I stared death? I stared death right in the face earlier this month. And really subsequently, but I don't want to talk about it. But I'm saying, Sandy, let me just tell you, because I know what that's like. That's really hard, because you're going to be like the provider. And she said, it's really weird. At 22, you're kind of planning your future. At 62, you're kind of planning your death. So I kind of, I really love Sandy, and I really enjoy being with her. And if I ever regret, I'm kind of going, my biological clock is ticking here. But time is your ally. Remember the old saying? We try to get it in the water here. Most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a decade. Everything has a way of kind of evening out as God works through things at his pace. And here's the last obvious point. God's economy is clearly different than ours. Joseph is succeeding. Really? He's in jail. Yeah, in God's economy. Now, man also sees the prosperity around him in that limited sense, but you can make the argument, how successful can he be? I mean, this isn't what I call success. It might not be, but it's what God calls success. By the way, Joseph's not at a scary place. He's at the safest place he can be because he's right where God wants him. Remember what I said at the beginning? To be continued? We'll just build on that all the way along through these entire 4 weeks. Here comes Jake to lead us here in the chapel in our time of communion over in the conference center. The guys are going to come and close the service. But let me pray as Jake comes to lead us in communion. Father, thank you for that truth. And we look at Joseph. We know that we see his life, and there's so many parallels in ours. Let us be faithful in the midst of adversity and challenges and difficulties. God, we love you. We worship you. We pray that you would work in our life the way you worked in Joseph's life. We pray that in Christ's name. Amen.